You're listening to the Men in Blazers Media Network, Suboptimal Radio.
You know, you have a player going in with no expectations and they might play better because they don't realize it's a rivalry. Or for worse, they might not be as amped as they need to be to go 2-foot tackle somebody or whatever it might be.
It's Rog, and it is the finest time of my week, back with another episode of The Women's Game, presented by Paramount Plus. And joining me today, I have the greatest centre-back in the entire city of Chicago, a title she retains in the eyes of this podcast, even while rehabbing from injury. Truly one of the players I'm missing watching on the field this season. Hero to ACL rehabbers across the nation, from your Chicago Red Stars and the US Women's National Team. Live from Chicago itself, it's Tierna Davidson.
Wow, that was like one of the greatest intros of myself I've ever heard, but thank you, Raj.
I can give no more. That's all I've got. But Tina, it is a joy to have you back on the pod and back in the country after what, judging from Instagram, looked like one of the world's most heartfelt family reunions in Dublin. Can we get a status report on what went down and how the Irish side of the family aided your rehab?
I love going back to Ireland. My mom's side of the family is fantastic. It's always so nice going there because I feel like it's not a draining kind of vacation. It's very restorative being around family, and just being in Ireland, I feel like everybody's so happy and welcoming.
Couple of Guinnesses good for the rehab.
Oh yeah, I feel like that used to be the original recovery after games. Didn't guys used to drink beers after games?
And when you say used to, you're talking about 2017 in the Premier League. I think that was phased out, but it is remarkable to be with you, and I do hope this podcast is a beacon of light amid what has been a week of challenge across our nation. And we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge up top the slew of seismic Supreme Court decisions released last week, and headlining them, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, stripping people of the right to abortion for the first time in 50 years. And it's a ruling that shook the entire country, shook me, clearly shook the NWSL. So many teams immediately putting out statements. We saw Megan Rapinoe speaking at length in the US Women's National Team pre-game press conference Friday.
I wish that we could just talk about soccer today. But obviously with the ruling on Roe v. Wade, that takes precedence over everything. It's hard to put into words how sad a day this is for me personally, for my teammates, for just all of the people out there who this is going to affect.
And when something like this hits the whole league so close to home, particularly something seismic like the overturning of Roe v. Wade, which jeopardises women's health, safety, bodily autonomy, issues that are so integral to life as a professional female footballer, can you give us a sense of how it's processed within the confines of a locker room?
It's something that has to be processed both very personally and then kind of as a community of women and as a community of, women athletes. It's a very personal issue for many people that have personal experience with it, many people that know people that have had personal experience with it. And so I think everyone took it as a really large blow and had to take the time to process it themselves before even being able to talk about it with anybody else. And I think that's kind of the feeling that I had, which is first processing, how does this affect me personally? And like, how do I feel about it? And, then thinking about, how does this affect my teammates? How does this affect our league? How does this affect our country? There's so many different layers to it. It just seems more daunting each layer that you dig into. And it just gets darker and deeper. And so I feel like to have at least a group of very strong women around us with our teams is very helpful and very comforting. And to know that our league and our teams are behind us and in our beliefs that women should have the right to their own bodies, their right to choose whatever is right for them is very important in times like this.
I'm fascinated. A political issue arising that players and teams are going to want to respond to. They're expected to respond to even as a prominent and vocal platform for human rights. So how does that process work? I mean, God bless Gotham FC. They actually got a statement out on the issue faster than the Democratic Party. How does that work? Does the front office consult with the players before putting out a statement, or vice versa? Is it something that originates from the players and is then taken higher up? How does it work?
I mean, I think it's obviously unique to each team, and it probably depends on the issue and how apt the front office is to talk on something versus how apt the players are. So that probably would dictate maybe where it originates. In this case, it definitely did originate from the front office. They were very much on it. They sent us a statement over an email saying, just FYI, this is going to be posted. And, I'm very happy to see that we put something out and we said something, just because I feel like this was such an important issue to speak on.
It was against this backdrop that the US women's national team played their first game of the international break on Saturday night, the first of two friendlies against Colombia before they head off to Mexico for the CONCACAF Women's Championship, the 2-week tournament which serves as CONCACAF's qualifier for the Women's World Cup. And Tierna, I'm elated to have you on this week to talk about the US women's national team in a lot of ways. I mean, first and foremost, this is a US team in transition, younger players beginning more and more to replace the tried and tested veterans that we know and love in these starting lineups. And you, more than anybody, have a unique perspective in terms of that, because you span almost the two cycles of national team players. Age-wise, you're one of that new generation coming up into the national team. But you made your international debut so early, 2018, age just 19. You're actually the youngest player on the roster at the 2019 World Cup. So you almost have a foot in both of the cycles. So emotionally, how does it feel for you seeing your younger peers added to national team rosters while the veteran players who guided you through the process, who you won that World Cup with, are being phased out?
It's definitely mixed emotions. It's bittersweet, to see some of the players who helped foster my growth, who helped guide me through uncharted waters in my journey. To see them exit is very sad, because it does mean kind of like a changing of the guard, a bit of a new wave coming in. But then on the other hand, it's also very exciting to see players that I grew up playing with and against, both in the national cycle and, in club and college. It is very exciting to see these players get an opportunity and make it to this level. So I would say there's kind of a mixed bag of emotions.
Who were those players in that first category when you think of international team veterans who really mentored you?
First player that actually kind of took me in was Megan Rapinoe. She was kind to me and made me feel like I belonged, like I was included, which can be very difficult in the environment. And then, positionally, Becky Sauerbrunn for sure, Abby Dahlkemper, Kelly O'Hara, Crystal Dunn. The backline unit was just amazing, because it's really easy in that environment to kind of turn inwards and only focus on yourself, because it is so competitive and it is hard to be there. But to have kind of the bigger picture view of, we need to make sure that everybody's on the same page and everybody's contributing as much as they can, and that means pulling up younger players and getting them on the right page. That's a very commendable aspect of a lot of the players on the team, and I think that's part of the reason that they've been there for so long.
I want to talk about that hybrid experience of being welcomed and also maintaining that competitive cutting edge within a squad in a moment. But you mentioned Megan Rapinoe, and I'm fascinated because when the roster for this camp was announced, a couple of veterans who aren't necessarily on top form were called in. An accusation that, to be clear, can't touch Alex Morgan, who we're witnessing play some of the finest club soccer we have ever seen from her, but was directed specifically at the choice to include Megan Rapinoe, who had only started, I think, one game for the Reign so far this season. It wasn't on a run, never mind a form, but really of match fitness. And it was something that Megan addressed directly in a truly fascinating interview with Jeff Kassouf on ESPN last week. She basically said, sure, I'm not in my best form, but I know how everything works. I know how to translate what Vlatko wants into results on the pitch. And if you've got problems with me being in the squad, take them up with Vlatko. As fans, we don't get to see anything of what goes on behind the scenes. And we tend then to hyper-focus on on-field performance as an indicator of players' value. But you've been there in camp. You know, how would you quantify the importance of those intangibles, leadership, experience? How does it work, especially with Megan?
What she said is really spot on. You know, I know how things work, because I think that's one of the hardest things as a new player coming into that environment. It doesn't matter how good you are, it doesn't matter what kind of talents or unique, you know, special qualities that you bring to the field. It is hard to get on the same page in meetings, in tactics, in language, in what the coaches want and how they communicate. Like, it is difficult. And that's probably the hardest part of being in camp, is getting up to speed and trying to find how you fit into a puzzle that's already largely built. It's really helpful to have veterans there that know the system, that know kind of how things operate, and are willing to then pass that knowledge and guidance on to you. Because I think, you know, you could have a veteran that knows exactly how everything operates, but then just goes about their own business. But I think Megan does a good job of knowing how things operate. She acts as a good bridge between the coaching staff and the players. Obviously, she has a very good relationship with Vlatko because she's known him and been coached by him for a number of years. But I also feel like her kind of magnetic, energetic presence is also very helpful. I think it relaxes people, to be honest. I think oftentimes the environment can be very, you know, tension filled, and people are concerned about everything going on the field, and, you know, sometimes things are a bit high strung. And I think the way that she plays and the way that she carries herself and acts allows for a bit of fun and a little bit of like tension release, which can be helpful both off the field and on the field. That energy is seen and felt. And I think you can see when she steps onto the field, she brings a bit of like fun, a bit of spunk, and a bit of relaxation around the ball.
I've got to say, I was impressed with her big air in the instant celebration that resulted from her free kick that set up that third goal. Godspeed to her. That was actually a fine cameo to cap off a 3-0 win for the US on Saturday night at DSG Park in Commerce City, Colorado. That's 3 C's in front of a remarkable sellout crowd of 17,000 plus. The match itself, a little bit more of a slog than the scoreline makes it sound. 0-0 at the half, but the cutting edge of play sharpened by the arrival of Ashley Sanchez of the Washington Spirit at the break. A brace from Sophia Smith ensued. Rose Lavelle feeding her runs like a perfectly calibrated pitch machine. A stoppage time goal from Taylor Korniak, making her international debut, closed out the game. And Tierna, first off, Sophia Smith, 21 years old. What an incredible talent, trailing just Alex Morgan on club goals for the season with 8 so far in NWSL play. And you were a teammate with Sophia in your last season at Stanford. You've obviously defended against her many times in the league since then. Can you describe what makes her so bloody threatening in front of net?
One of the things that she does very well is she has a very quick release on her shot. She only requires a couple inches of separation, a quick prep touch, and all of a sudden she's got a banger of a foot to bury the ball in the back of the net. And so, you know, you think that, I've got her corralled in this section and she just gets a tiny bit of separation and it's in the back of the net, and you're like, how the heck did that happen? But I also feel like her ability to a body feint and like a quick touch and explode off of you is so quick that if you're not anticipating what she's doing, you don't have a chance. So it requires a defender to continuously anticipate, which a few times in the game you're going to get it wrong, and those few times she's putting it in the net.
So when you are defending against her, what is going through your mind from the very off?
I feel like it's one of those moments where you're like, force the least dangerous option. Like, you know that you're dealing with a very good player, and so it's not like, oh, this is, I can turn off, I can just get the ball and go about my business. It's more forcing the least dangerous option, which might be across from the end line rather than her cutting in and serving it into the back post, or you know, it might be forcing her to play a one touch as opposed to take you on 1v1. But it really is like the lesser of two evils rather than, you know, I'm going to win this battle. It's having to really weigh your options and then decide, what's the best outcome for yourself.
Tierna Davidson, risk mitigator.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the name of the game for most center backs.
And thinking about the quote unquote next generational stars on this roster, you got players like Sophia, Trinity Rodman, tipped to become the face of the game in the next couple of years. Oftentimes with young players, we focus on what they lack: maturity, tournament experience, whatever. But is there anything you think this younger generation of US women's players is bringing to the table for the US for the first time?
The amount of creativity and confidence that this younger group brings is amazing. And I think you can see it when they step out onto the field, how quickly they're able to make an impact in the game. I also think that as the professionalism continues to improve in America and in the NWSL, you can understand that players that are young are more quickly ready to be a professional than I think they used to be. And that's just because the game has continued to develop. And so now you see 19, 20, 21-year-olds that know how to take care of their body, know how to use their resources to be the best athlete that they can, and understand that that's like part of their job, and have access to things that can help them be the best athlete. And I think that's serving them very well.
God, I love that so bloody much. And all 3 goals Saturday night scored by players with fewer than 20 caps between them. Taylor Korniak, as I mentioned earlier, the 23-year-old San Diego midfielder, snagging both her first cap and her first international goal. What a debut. Fine finish with a clipped header. Godspeed to her. There were also, should we say, a couple of other players on the roster who didn't make the lineup over the weekend, getting their first call-ups for the squad in addition to Taylor. Carson Pickett, first call-up at 28 years old, so genuinely bloody happy for her. Sam Coffey, the 23-year-old Thorns rookie. Can you describe what the experience is like? Because to me, so bloody daunting. I'm not a great group joiner. Being called into your first senior camp, what a group to join. At any age, really, but particularly as a young player like you did. Is it intimidating at all?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's for sure intimidating because you want to go there and you want to prove to the players more than the coaches that you deserve to be there and you belong. Because ultimately, in order to play well, in order to stick around, like you have to have the confidence of the players around you. And I think once you get the confidence of the players around you, then it's easier to get the confidence of the coaches. And so it's daunting to try and win over 20-some people who are more experienced, who might be older than you, who are very good. And so it definitely is intimidating, but you have to find the balance of being intimidated and being kind of respectful of the players that are there and have walked before you and have kind of paved this path for you, but then also the confidence to know that there's a reason that you're there, there's a reason that you've been called up and given this opportunity, and try to make the most of it.
I'm fascinated by that idea that you have to win over the players at the outset more than the coaches. How do you monitor that? How do you evaluate that? Is that just a gut feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a feeling that at least I personally get whenever I come into a new team environment, because those are the people that you're interacting with the most. And the more confidence your teammates have in you, the better you play. Because, if you get the confidence, like for me, if I'm a left center back and I get the confidence of my left outside back and I screw up a pass and my left outside back is like, hey, Tierna, like no problem, next one. That makes me feel better, and it makes me harp a little bit less on the mistakes, and it makes me play better in the next play. But if I don't have someone saying that to me because they don't know me, they're not confident in me yet, they don't see that, then I'm just sitting stewing with my own thoughts, and it's harder to get out of your head.
I am fascinated because you're trying to do that as an individual within a collective culture, and not just any collective culture, but within the competitive dynamic of an elite national team football squad. An elite national team football squad that wins things and expects to win. And you've already hinted there's an element of mentoring that the older players can do, but they're also very aware that they're actually competing for starting playing time with you. What was your experience of that push-pull dynamic when you first joined the squad as a mere 19-year-old?
There's a very good culture of mentorship amongst the players. And I think that's what's so important, and that's what's made the team so successful, is that the players want the team to be successful. They want the team to be successful before themselves. And that then results in team success, which then results in individual success. So wanting every player to be the best that they can inevitably will result in good team dynamics and good team chemistry, and that'll get you results on the field. And then that'll reflect well upon all of the players individually. So I do think that it is a bit of a push and pull, because you are competing individually for roster spots, for playing time, for going to tournaments, whatever it is. But you are part of a team. You are one of 23. And part of that is sharing your secrets, sharing your lessons that you've learned with people who haven't been there yet. And I think that's part of the culture and the fabric of this team, which is I think unique at this level. But it makes us very successful.
Very successful is actually an understatement. But when you started playing with that senior national team back in 2018, I imagine it takes some time to truly consider yourself a national team player rather than a player who has been called up to the national team. Is there a difference? And is there a moment when that mental transition happened for you?
I don't even know if it's still fully happened, because the reality of the situation is like you've never made it. Like you're never guaranteed a spot. And so, every tournament roster, every camp roster is different. And so it is hard to consider yourself a member of the team versus someone that's been on the team for a couple camp call-ups. And that's hard to explain to people when they're like, oh, like you're on the national team. And I'm like, okay, well, I've played for them before, but there's no guarantee for the future. I mean, it is special to have played in major tournaments. And I do think that's kind of part of the solidifying, okay, like I've been through some major moments with this team. And so at least that can't be taken away from me. Like I always will have been a part of a World Cup team. I always will have been a part of an Olympic team. But I mean, to be quite frank, and I think Becky can attest to this, like she's still waiting 2 weeks before every camp for her email. Everyone's still waiting 2 weeks before every camp for their email, because it is impossible to assume that you're going to be on a camp roster. And so you still do get those jitters and butterflies when you're like, oh gosh, it's the date. Has anyone else received their email? Am I getting it? Have I been cut?
That is the essence of Becky Sauerbrunn right there. 200 plus camps, and she's still waiting nervously for that phone call. And I was talking to Alana Cook and Andy Sullivan last week, Stanford Mafia, about the experience of roster call-ups. Just as you described, the nerves of seeing that call from Vlatko come up on your phone, the Schrodinger's cat of telephone calls. My World Cup dreams are both alive and dead as this phone rings. Do you remember where you were when you found out you were going to the World Cup in 2019?
I was at SeatGeek Stadium. I had just gotten off the training pitch, and we had known that there was going to be kind of, I think, 2 or 3 days range between, which we could get the call. And so basically it was like no eating, no sleeping for these 2 or 3 days because you were so concerned about the phone call. I was in the locker room changing because I actually had a media appearance to do after training to talk about the World Cup roster that I didn't know if I was going to be on or not. And my phone lights up and it's Jill, and I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. I'm like, I don't know if I can handle this phone call in my locker room, like with my teammates, because it is the Schrodinger's cat of phone calls. This could be one of the greatest moments of my life. This could be a huge heartbreak, instant sweaty palms, instant like anxiety. And so I step out into the hallway and I take the phone call. And like, thank God.
Play it cool, play it cool, Tina. Play it cool.
Hey, what's
Jill.
up? Like, what you calling about? No. And, like, thankfully, she didn't drag it out or anything. And one of the first things that she said was like, "Congratulations!" And I literally just blacked after that. I couldn't tell you one word that she said, and then I just had to like peacefully walk back into the locker room and like mind my own business and get ready for my media appearance, and then go to the media appearance and act like I didn't know if I was on the roster or not because I couldn't tell anyone yet.
God, Tierna Davidson, the ultimate professional. The professional's professional, I can't tell you. I would have been like in the Willy Wonka movie, just like, I've got a golden ticket. But that World Cup, as fans, we see it holding such a privileged place in the football calendar, and we start talking about it years out. 2023 Australia, my God, counting down those days, building up in our mind as this, what it is from the outside, glorious pinnacle of achievement. Every footballer's ultimate dream was to make a World Cup roster, play for their nation. I'm genuinely fascinated. You played in one. When you're actually there, does it still feel so grand and surreal in that way? Or is there complete cognitive dissonance between the dream and the grinding reality of it all, working so bloody hard, training so bloody hard, building as a collective towards a goal, and playing all those games under such sustained pressure?
There's a lot that people don't see, a lot of pressure, a lot of work. And it was a grind for not only the month that we were there, but also very much the months leading into it. And so I think that it was important that you lived kind of like day by day through the tournament. It was like, okay, do what I can in this training to make myself better, to make my teammates prepared, and then like move on to the next day, the next training or the game. I think there were like small moments of, oh my gosh, this is actually the World Cup. One of the games that we played against Chile, one of the games that I played in, was amazing just to be on the field and to kind of see the atmosphere. It was in Paris. It was at PSG Stadium. It was amazing. And then again, when we played at their stadium against France, I think that was the most electric crowd that I'd ever been in front of. To have so many of our fans there, but also so many French fans there, and to have both anthems being sung by both groups of fans, was just absolutely amazing. It was unreal to experience that. So I feel like there were moments, but there was also a lot of work put into it that was just kind of like head down and grind.
In those moments, which, God, just hearing you mention them just takes us, I'm sure, all listeners back to such deeply evocative, deeply ingrained memories in our own sports watching, the hippocampus. When you're experiencing that, do you feel in that second, I consciously have to savor this second and never forget this feeling?
I think my brain kind of subconsciously puts it in an important place, in an important filing cabinet way in the back. I think that sometimes I also hear the voice of my mother being like, enjoy this, relish in this, like, can you believe you've just done this, or can you believe you're doing this? And I think that's what parents are for, to try and remind you to enjoy the moments in your life and, pat yourself in the back for the accomplishments that you've had. It is important to reflect on the moments when you have the time. I think that that's what I had to do, was like live the moment and then think about it later and be like, oh, wow, like that was very cool. That was very special.
God, I will say, I've said it 100 times on this podcast. I say it 100 times on every podcast. Mothers are the single greatest. May we all have the sound of Tierna's mother in our heads at key moments in our life. But looking ahead to World Cup qualifying, and as a quick refresher for listeners, this is all going down tournament style. Unlike the men's qualifying, the United States, provided they make it out the group stage, will be playing 5 matches within 2 weeks, beginning appropriately on July the 4th. 3 group stage games plus semi-finals, and either a final or a third place match to come. And in previous cycles, World Cup qualification has been determined by the knockout rounds. But with World Cup 2023 expanded to 32 teams, CONCACAF now gets 4 direct slots, meaning that for the United States to qualify for World Cup 2023, they just need to finish in the top half of their group. Tierna, we're grouped with host Mexico, Jamaica, Haiti, and Mexico have got the better of the United States just twice in almost 40 years of competition. One of those, of course, being the memorable upset in the 2010 version of this very tournament, which sent the US to the Interconfederation playoff against Italy, almost saw us miss the 2011 World Cup. but Mexico have not truly threatened the United States since. And other than the US, on paper, they're the strongest team in that group. And Tina, I am not a naturally optimistic person, but I look at that group. Do you see a scenario where the US can't finish in the top two mentally? Do you allow yourself to see it when you talk to friends, to teammates on that roster? Do you allow yourself to think in those terms?
You know, if I was sitting there in that tournament getting ready, like the lowest expectation is getting second in the group. Like that is like the floor. That is the lowest accepted result that the players and the coaches would be mentally preparing for, because we are a group of winners. We are a group of excellent, crazy, psycho, till you die, we're going to win this. So I think that is like the lowest accepted kind of scenario that anybody's even kind of brewing up in their mind. And I think that's what drives the team to be successful, is like the lowest scenario is not we don't make it out of that group, or like the lowest scenario is you get second. It's like a first or second. Those are the only two ones. There's no other choice.
But we could potentially, and I don't like to get too far ahead of ourselves in any way, shape or form, we could be facing Canada along the way. And this is a Canadian team who knocked us out at the Olympics last year before going on to win the gold medal. You've got to imagine they're one of the major threats going into the World Cup next year too. Does that add to the stakes in how you mentally would approach this tournament, especially the knockout round?
For us, Canada's always been a great rivalry game. I think that so there's always been a lot of passion and emotion in that game. And I think even more so after last year, that's going to be a game that the players are looking forward to and excited for. I think a lot of the responsibility is going to fall on the players who were at the Olympics to kind of rev up the team and say, like, you know, we're going into this and we're absolutely going to smash it. Because I do think that one of the downfalls of having young players is sometimes they don't understand some of the rivalries or some of the history between teams. And so for better or for worse, you know, you have a player going in with no expectations and they might play better because they don't realize it's a rivalry, or for worse, they might not be as amped as they need to be to go 2-foot tackle somebody or whatever it might be. But I think that our side would welcome that face off wherever it comes, whatever round that comes in. But I think that the team is certainly gearing up to win the tournament because of the implications that it has, not only for the World Cup qualifying, but also for the Olympic qualifying.
At risk of getting too far ahead of ourselves, I do want to look forward for a second to the World Cup next year. 32 teams instead of 24, a European field that's gotten exponentially more competitive, even just only the last 4 years, as we're about to witness with Euro 2022. And when you watch the growth of European football, Spain, so tactically savvy, in addition to the more established threats of England and France and Germany, how different do you imagine World Cup 2023 will be to previous iterations?
It's going to be a whole different monster. I mean, it is amazing to see all of those European teams that have continued to hone their game, have continued to pour more resources into their women's side, and it's paid off in dividends. I mean, I think you could see the performance of Italy last World Cup and say they're going to be a big threat as well, because they did fantastic. They were a team that I think was possibly looked over a bit, and they did amazing in the tournament. So I think Europe presents a lot of fantastic women's football teams, and I think the tournament will be that much better because of the extra teams included.
Euro 2022 is upon us. What do you see? We talked about Spain a little bit in terms of the different footballing threats that tournament is going to pitch.
I think you see a lot of very, very good teams facing off. And there are going to be teams that perhaps deserve to be in a World Cup that won't make it just because of sheer numbers. And you know, the number of teams that they have that are good quality teams, they just, you know, don't have room, which is unfortunate. But I think you'll see a lot of different styles of football kind of converging and clashing. Spain's got a very unique style of play, super organized, super technical. Like they just seem like they're all on the same page all the time, probably because a lot of them play together in the club. And so they're definitely going to be a force to be reckoned with. We've got the classic Germany, France, England, Sweden, who's in form. They're all going to be bringing their best game to this tournament. So it'll be really exciting soccer to watch.
387 days until World Cup 2023. Who's counting? Well, everybody is the answer to that. So the weekend ahead, NWSL is back with us, albeit stripped of the US women's national team players and also those who are out for Euro action. Tierna, we are just about halfway through the season, making the next couple of weeks truly a pivotal axis. Do you think we'll see the impact of those absences on the rest of the season?
I think you'll definitely see teams having to adapt to having some of their key players gone. But on the other hand, you'll also see players that perhaps don't get a lot of minutes otherwise have the opportunity to step up and make an impact for their team. So sometimes these are the most exciting moments of the season because you see players that finally get the chance to get some real minutes on the field, make a big difference, show their skills and show what they have to offer. And it is exciting to see those players, whether they be new, whether they be from overseas. With the national team players gone, there's a different kind of atmosphere around the team. And it's really whatever team can kind of disperse the responsibility that the national team players had and pick up all of those loose ends and pull it together, and everyone pulls their weight in terms of leadership, in terms of responsibility on the field, in terms of commitment to the team. Whoever can pull that together the best is going to see the best run throughout this international time. And typically the teams that do the best in the international breaks and can pick up the most points end up doing the best in the playoffs, that are able to make it into the playoffs.
You mentioned this slate of younger players, and that brings me to a second mention this week for the truly prolific Jeff Kassouf, who unleashed another piece on ESPN last week about this year's class of rookies being possibly the best the league has ever seen. And I have to imagine with so many stars out, we are going to be talking about those rookies more than ever in the upcoming weeks. Players like Jalen Howell and Savannah DeMello at Racing Louisville, Elise Bennett at Kansas City, Amira Ali at San Diego, Ava Cook with you at the Red Stars. Young players who've already impressed so far this season, given more space, as you say, to unleash major impact. Tierna, we know you're not out at centre-back clashing with these young players week in, week out right now, but watching from the sidelines and talking to your Red Stars teammates, are the new players in this league who particularly caught your eye so far this season?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the hope is that every ensuing year of this league and the draft, like, you feel like every year is the best rookie class, because you hope that women's soccer just continues to get better and more elite at the college level, and is bringing in players that are more prepared to step on the field and give significant minutes to this league. But I mean, even playing against Ava in preseason, I definitely could see the potential that she had to make an impact for our team, and the way that she was able to soak in like a sponge and grow so quickly from all of the advice and lessons that she got from coaches and from other players on the field. She's really grown her game and made it a multi-dimensional game so quickly. And so, we're only halfway through the season and she's still got so many games to play. But you also mentioned Amira Ali from San Diego. I had, I think, 1 or 2 youth camps with her, but I feel like every game that I've watched of theirs, she's come into the game and made an instant impact. Like, no matter kind of what the flow of the game was or who was winning, she would come in and create a serious goal scoring opportunity or score a goal. And that's hard to do in this league, is to come in and like catch up to the pace of the game immediately and do something significant. So I would also say she's definitely a player to watch.
Double A. And we have a banging slate of games coming up this weekend. Kicking us off, Nichelle Prince's Houston Dash take on Kansas City Current, Friday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Paramount Plus. And the Dash announced Monday that they've signed Ebony Salmon from Racing Louisville. That is a transfer I really rate. Current, also with a big announcement last week, they unveiled a new $18 million training facility. And I haven't fact-checked this, but it's claimed to be the first training facility built specifically for pro women's soccer anywhere in the world. Why stop there? Anywhere in the universe. Certainly the first of its kind in the NWSL. Do you look at that with wonder? Or do you look at it a bit more like, God, I wish every team had their own custom-built facility?
I think it's a bit of jealousy and a bit of wonder. As soon as I saw the video, I called my girlfriend over and I was like, hey, come look at this. Because they had the video of like the drone flying over the fields and the facility and then walking through the gym and the training room and the kitchen. And it's just, I mean, it's amazing. And it's so great to see them putting the money in to create a great facility for their players to use. And the better facilities you have for the players, the more they want to be there, the longer they want to be there. And so you're really building a legacy by putting this in the ground for them.
God, I watched that video. I've watched it about 100 times. I've been like, I was obviously like $80 million. This is an important moment for football in this nation. And I was also like, oh my God, how did they get a drone in the kitchen? But at 10 p.m. on Paramount Plus, OL Reign go head to head with the North Carolina Courage. Reign yet to debut any of their new massive signings. Be interesting to see if we get a Kim Little cameo or a Tobin Heath sighting this weekend. And at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, we have Angel City versus the Portland Thorns. What a clash that is. Thorns shut out LA 3-0 the last time they met. They're coming off that massive 6-0 win over Orlando right before the international break. Godspeed to Angel City fans. And talking about teams that I adore watching, 7 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday, it's your Chicago Red Stars. They go to Gotham to see what they can do. That game streaming on Paramount Plus as well. Tierna, let me take you to a happy place. That brief 24-hour window 2 weekends ago where the Chicago Red Stars were top of the table. Is that something you guys pay any attention to whatsoever? Or do you focus more on the wins themselves, the games themselves, rather than big picture where you are in relation to the rest of the league?
I think it's hard to focus on the table just because, as we said, how quickly it can change. It changes pretty much every weekend because people are 2 points apart, 1 point apart, tied for points. So it is hard to kind of look at the table and really make it mean anything. So I think it's more just kind of about focusing on your current form as a team and, you know, what you can do for next weekend's game. I mean, because quite frankly, the table doesn't matter until the last day of the season. And I think we definitely embraced that last year because we were low on the table for a significant amount of last season. But we also knew that, you know, it's never say die. Like it's not over till it's over. And we knew what we had to do towards the end of last season in order to get into playoff contention. And so I think it's hard to look at a table right now and say, oh, you know, congratulations, you're at the top of the table. It's like, well, it doesn't really mean right now.
Oh, it does to me, Tierna. Champions of the top of the table for 24 hours. You'll never sing that. And then on Sunday, Orlando Pride kick things off against Racing Louisville at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on CBS Sports Network. Tierna, we haven't really talked about the Pride that much on the pod this season. It's clear they're having a challenge go of it right now. There's been staffing issues, roster issues. They've suffered some real on-field losses. And we talk about how much in this league is close, how tight this league is, how a run of 2 or 3 good wins can launch you back into playoff contention. When you see a team struggling like this as an opponent, how much you have to remind yourself not to let your guard down?
What makes this league so special is that no matter where a team is in the table or their past 5-game record, you could beat them, they could beat you, it could be a blowout, it could be 1-1. There is really no predicting the scoreline, and I think that's what makes this league so difficult. There's never a game really that you can kind of let your guard down and be like, no, we got this. Like it'll be a walk in the park, and I think that's why it's so competitive. My heart definitely goes out to them for everything that they've gone through and continue to go through. But I do know that it only takes one win to kind of flip the script a little bit. I hope that they can do that for the sake of their team kind of camaraderie and culture, and for the players after everything they've dealt with.
And last, but certainly not least, it's amazing how long we've been saying this. Still top of the table, San Diego Wave. They face Washington Spirit, Sunday, 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Paramount Plus. And the football doesn't stop there, though, because Monday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, the US women kick off their first game of the CONCACAF W Championship. That'll be against Haiti. They play Jamaica Thursday, July 7th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and then face Mexico the following Monday at 10 p.m. Eastern to close out the group stage. Please God, at the very least in second place. All those games streaming on Paramount Plus, and visit paramountplus.com/MIBTWG. That's MIBTWG to try 1 week of Paramount Plus free on us and just revel in that US women's national team majesty. And we'd be remiss if we didn't mention those Euros as well. They kick off next Wednesday. England face Austria. We'll be talking more about that tournament on the pod next week. And Tierna, we have to sign off for the week. I have enjoyed this conversation, which started with Ireland, progressed through life truths from your mother, and went to places that I will remember for a long time. And so I want to leave the last word to you. Ask you to close us out in the now traditional way. A note of optimism. My Lord, God, we need that more than ever. Every week I ask for a note of optimism, and every week I need it more than ever. Tierna, what is the thing that's brought you joy this week, that's cut through the turmoil, the frustrations, the darkness, and given even a fleeting sense that everything could be okay?
I got to give a shout out to one of our fans from Chicago. He works for the public library system. His name's Eddie. He basically gave me like a 15 plus book recommendation list based on books that I had said that I liked. And all of them, he hand wrote this letter to me. All of them have little descriptions on what they're about. And it was like all handpicked for me. And I'm like, listen, dude, I'm never going to have to pick another book for myself in my life. I got it right here. So that was pretty great to receive that from him.
Oh, we all need an Eddie in our life. And big shout out to the Chicago Public Library System. I have spent so many happy hours in the Harold Washington Library. What a remarkable operation, organisation in a city that is soaked with culture. But I need to know more about this list, Tierna. What books did you recommend as the I like these, so Eddie says you will like those?
Okay, one of the books I said I loved reading was Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, classic nonfiction journey of Nike story. Another one, Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens, a really great fiction book. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. That was, all the rage a couple months ago, and I think everyone loves that one. We got The Song of Achilles, a really great kind of fantasy novel. And last one was The Silent Patient, which is kind of a thriller, psychological suspense. So really kind of all over the board. And he gave me no less than 6 recommendations for each of these, which is absolutely amazing.
We've got to get that list from you and just bring Eddie's taste filter to the world. I will say, if Tierna Davidson does not get an Audible sponsorship after this podcast, then there's something just not right with the world. But that is it for the women's game this week, which went very, very book TikTok in the most wonderful way. We will be back next week for a very special episode with the remarkable Casey Stoney, talking all things San Diego Wave, NWSL, and also we'll be touching upon the Euros and the growth of the game over there. But for now, Godspeed. Thank you to the glorious Tierna Davidson.
Thanks for having me, Raj.
We'll be back next Thursday. Godspeed, America, and courage.